So after making the famous Pig Saver ham in a recent video, I immediately got requests to make a quicker and easier version that doesn't require the wash the flour technique. I'm excited to share I've got an 80% there, which I'm super proud of because this is one of the best recipes I know of, and getting this close after changing the core technique and the ingredients is super hard to do. For the food nerds out there, I'll talk more about how this recipe can improve and test it at the end of the video. I hope this is good enough to carry the Pig Saver name. With that said, let's get into it. All right, so the quicker and easier version of the Pig Saver ham. Oh my goodness, that looks juicy. Go ahead and grab a blender and add 10 ounces of firm tofu. Now add 3 teaspoons of salt here. I know everyone's tastes are different here, so add an extra teaspoon or subtract 1 if that's your thing. Then add a half teaspoon of MSG, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of mushroom powder, and then 1.5 cup of cool water. Now to get that nice ham color we all know and love, we're gonna add an 1/8 teaspoon and 2 teeny drops of vegan red food dye. This one's McCormick. Different brands might yield different results, so watch out for that there too. 2 tablespoons of liquid smoke. Now go ahead and blend all that up. It should look like Pepto-Bismol, which I understand is kind of a weird comparison. Now just don't drink it. I'm just joshing around here. To a bowl, add 2 cups of Vital Wheat gluten. This is the ingredient that is going to give us that shortcut. We're using this instead of wash the flour method in the original Pig Saver recipe. And it's going to yield a different result, but we have to be okay with that if we don't want to use the other recipe. Then after that, add 4 teaspoons onion powder, 2 teaspoons garlic powder, and a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Whisk that to combine, and then go ahead and add your Pepto-Bismol ham smoothie mixture to the bowl. So get in there and mix that up by hand, making sure that there are no dry bits of the gluten left, and you will end up with a pretty floopy dough, so kneading here is incredibly important to develop the gluten. It's going to rip pretty easily and like, oh, that just happened. So make sure that you knead for no less than 5 minutes total. So fold, press, turn, fold, press, turn, until you get to this level of gluten pulling. It's never going to be super tough to pull apart, but when it's ready, it shouldn't tear right away like it does in the beginning. Now that we have what we want, spread it out into as much of a symmetrical rectangle as you can. Cut that sucker in half and then add 1 teaspoon dollops of vegan butter on there, about 1 inch away from each other. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna trap little juicy pockets of fat in the roast, which is what makes it so delectable to look at when you cut into it. So it should look like this when you're done. You can use your fingers there to make sure they're kind of all symmetrical. Then go ahead and cover the buttered dough with the other slab, and then use your hands to shore up any tiny holes, making sure the butter is trapped. I'm pinching here as there are places where I can see through the dough to the other side. And then reconnect the gluten on all 4 sides, pinching along the way to make sure to create a little fortress of fatty flavor in there. Now take a big sheet of heavy-duty aluminum foil and put the roast right in the center. Form it into a little loaf and then tightly wrap it up like a burrito, pinching the ends and then Tootsie rolling it up. While it should be pretty tight, it doesn't need to be like ultra tight vault, if that makes sense. Now do that again one more time with another sheet. I don't think that this is always 100% needed, but it makes sure that it doesn't explode in the oven. You can always keep and recycle these for future seitan adventures. That's what I do at least. Go ahead and bid your roast adieu. After the pre-bake, let it sit a bit until it cools enough to handle and then remove from the wrap. Don't freak out if it looks a little janky. We're gonna fix that in a second, and then poke it with a fork 4 to 5 times on each side. You know, I don't know if this actually does anything. I've never tested it, but it's pretty easy to do, so I just kind of always do it. And then to a boiling pot of veggie stock, add your loaf. When you add the roast, it is gonna cool the stock down, and I'd rather bring the temp down than try and bring cool stock to a simmer while the roast is in there. If you want, you can take the stock off the heat. That will pretty rapidly chill out the hard boiling because you don't want to boil your seitan the whole time. It will make it bready. I see boil seitan online constantly. Just don't do it. All right, movie magic. It's the next day. Whoa! And we're gonna finish the ham with a smoked maple glaze. So go ahead and add a half cup of brown sugar, a half cup of maple syrup. Make sure you squeegee everything out of that cup. Maple syrup is like super expensive, so get every last drop you can. 2 tablespoons liquid smoked flavoring, 2 tablespoons vegan Worcestershire sauce, and a half teaspoon of ground cloves. Y'all, cloves aren't just for the holidays. They're a great year-round spice, so don't forget about them for me, please. Once your roast is back up to room temp after resting overnight, cover the roast with 1/4 of the glaze, turn and do the same thing, doing the brushy brush on both sides, and then pop that in the oven for 30 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 C. At the 15-minute mark, take it out and use the rest of the glaze to coat it again. And once it's done, dig in. This is really good on its own as slices. It would go great with some mashed potatoes and gravy. Also tastes great fried up and put on a sandwich with some mustard and vegan cheese. So as promised, some areas where I think this recipe is great is that the smokiness is on point. I think this is because you can actually just add the liquid smoke to the blender in the beginning versus having to dry it out in the salt in the original pig saver ham recipe. But real talk, as far as improvements go, I think this roast is not as visually stunning, which is fine because that doesn't affect the flavor, but I do think the texture could be a little bit more dense to match Kim's original recipe. By the way, I've linked that original recipe below. I would love to hear what you tested out. Please post that in the comments below so we can keep a record of how this recipe develops. If you're at the end of this video and you haven't watched my original video on the pig saver ham, click the link on your screen now. I've also linked it below. And until next time, y'all, please be nice to each other and keep cooking.